Hello and welcome to another episode of Pick 3 DST, where I give you 3 defenses I like and 1 defense I'm fading for Week 14 of the NFL season. Before we get to our picks for Week 14, we have to do our accountability check for what was admittedly a pretty stellar Week 13. Our sleeper defense, the Colts, scored 17 points, and our solid defense, the Chargers, also put up 17 points. Our stud defense, the Atlanta Falcons, put up 14 points, and those were the 3 highest scoring defenses of the week. The defense we faded, the Patriots, put up 6, so we feel pretty good about that fade, and overall was pretty much a slam dunk for Week 13, and we've been flying pretty high with these picks over the last few weeks, which has me a little bit worried for what's going to happen in Week 14. But before we get to those Week 14 picks, as a reminder, you should comment below and let me know which defense you're starting this week, or ask me any start-sit questions, and I'll get to those as the week goes on. We'll start, as always, with my sleeper defense of the week, which is the Minnesota Vikings. Consensus has them at 15th, and I have them up at 7th on this week. If you've watched the videos this season, you know that this defense drives me crazy. Just when I'm big on the Vikings, they put up a dud. And then when I get critical of them, they go out and have a good game. So they're a defense that I've found really hard to pin down this year. However, I do know they're 3rd in the NFL in explosive play rate allowed. They're 13th in turnover rate, 15th in pressure rate, and 15th in opponent scoring rate. So they're a slightly above average defense, and they get a Raiders offense that gives up the 11th most fantasy points to opposing defenses over the last month. So we have a slightly above average defense in a pretty good matchup, and so I think the Vikings have a solid chance to sneak into the back half of the top 10 this week, although I don't have a ton of confidence in it, and that should tell you a lot about what the back half of the top 10 of defenses will look like in Week 14 of the NFL season. My solid defense of the week is the Houston Texans. Consensus has them at 7th, and I have them up at 3rd on the week. Now, you might not think of the Texans as a solid fantasy defense, but they've put up 8 points in 3 straight weeks and in 4 of the last 5, and that puts them in the middle of the pack over that span. On the season, they're 14th in pressure rate, 15th in turnover rate, and 16th in opponent scoring rate. So they're pretty much a smack dab in the middle average fantasy defense, but they're going up against the New York Jets, and you know by now that we can play pretty much any defense against the Jets. They're going to start either Trevor Siemian or Zach Wilson at quarterback this week, but Zach Wilson doesn't really want to play quarterback for the Jets. So really, whoever we get, it's going to be a plus matchup for the Texans. The Jets give up the most fantasy points to opposing defenses, so I think the Texans are a pretty solid play right here, and I expect them in the top 5 this week, just like the Falcons last week. My stud defense of the week is the Miami Dolphins. Consensus has them at 3rd, and I have them up at 1st this week. Not many teams have benefited from a cushy schedule the way the Dolphins have. The last 3 weeks, they've played the Raiders, Jets, and the Commanders, and the Dolphins' defense has put up an average of 15 fantasy points over those 3 games. But they get another juicy matchup against the Tennessee Titans offense that has still been pretty below average with Will Levis at quarterback, allowing the 7th most fantasy points to opposing defenses over the last month. Now, the Titans have come out and said that Derrick Henry did not suffer a concussion on Sunday, but he did leave the game with a head injury and didn't return. So we do need to keep an eye on his practice status during the week because the Titans don't really have much to play for. And while Henry likely isn't going to be back with the team next year, so they don't necessarily have to kind of like monitor his health, they may not rush him back, and they may want to see what rookie Tajay Spears can do with a full workload. So it is something to keep in mind. Also, even if Henry does play, this Dolphins defense has been really good. This season, they lead the NFL in knockdowns per game, which is sacks plus quarterback hits. They lead the NFL in pressure rate, and they are 7th in opponent scoring rate. So it's a pretty solid matchup and a pretty strong defense, and I really just like this play as one of the safest plays on the board. Before we get to the defense I'm fading for this week, if you want to check out my full weekly DST rankings, you can click on that link below, and I'll update that article as the week goes on. We get injury reports and weather reports and all of that. And you can also go to NBCSports.com and check out my updated playoff defense rankings so you can see which defenses to stash before you get to the fantasy football playoffs. Now we'll end with the defense I'm fading for this week, and it's the Baltimore Ravens. Consensus has them at 4th, and I have them down at 17th this week. Now, I've faded the Ravens a few times on this show, and it's not because I don't like the defense. They're a solid defense. It's because I think they get overrated in certain matchups because they're a pretty solid defense overall. This Rams matchup is not a good matchup. With Kyren Williams in the lineup, the Rams are one of the 10 worst plays for fantasy defenses. In fact, over the last month, they give up the second fewest fantasy points to opposing defenses. The Rams allow the fourth fewest sacks in the NFL, and they have the sixth best turnover rate as an offense. So they don't really turn the ball over, and they don't give up a lot of sacks, and that really lowers the ceiling for fantasy defenses against the Rams. So, yes, the Ravens don't allow a ton of points. They don't allow a lot of big plays. They could keep this game low scoring and keep the Rams offense in check. But I don't think that they're going to have any huge plays to give them a massive ceiling this week. So I think you can start them in deeper formats, but for me, they're just a floor play without a really high ceiling. So I'd be looking for something better if I have the opportunity. And that's going to do it for us in Week 14. As a reminder, you can click below to like and subscribe to get all of our football content and fantasy football content at NBC Sports. You can comment below, let me know which defense you're starting, or ask me any start-sit questions this week. You can also click that link below to get my full weekly DST rankings as the week goes on. And you can check me back next week for another episode of Pick 3 DST. Good luck on Sunday.